Welcome to the Live Like Eden podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay, and I'm thrilled that you're here. Years ago, out of nowhere, I found myself in a radical shift in consciousness that took me over 20 years to fully wrap my head around. Yes, that's right. It took me a long time, and without any warning, down the rabbit hole of darkness I went. Now I'm here to share with you all the insights of awakening, spirituality, health, the energetic world we're living in, and my absolute favorite topic, just how crazy the ego mind can be. These subjects are designed to help you understand the awakening process, to open your mind, and prepare you for your own unique spiritual journey toward inner peace. So I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy today's discussion. Before we get started with today's show, I want to share with you something I've been working on. I have created a quiz just for you to see where you are on your own unique spiritual path. Everybody loves a quiz, right? You can go to my website at livelikeeden.com, click on the quiz pop-up, and answer 10 quick questions. You'll get an immediate response emailed to you with your results, a personalized podcast playlist including 5 Live Like Eden episodes that will offer you assistance where you currently are. And I've also thrown in a few bonus episodes that you'll receive a few days later. If you're a spiritual junkie, you're in the midst of awakening, or you're simply curious where you might be in your own spiritual process, check it out and feel free to share with your friends who might be interested too. Welcome back to the Live Like Eden podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Lindsay. For those of you that are brand new, welcome to the show. I want to share with you an opportunity that I had this past weekend to share at a virtual retreat for a company called Awakenpedia. They frequently host virtual retreats on different spiritual topics. And I was asked to speak about transcending time to live in the now, specifically as it related to this weekend's theme, which was dissolving depression or dissolving darkness in your life. I thought it would be fun today to just share this with you and to give you some tools on how it's possible to shift these very dark moments in your life or difficult moments that we all have. How do you shift them and get really present in the now and transform your life into living in a completely new way? The topics we're going to go over today are, first, I want to discuss depression and darkness in general terms. Like, what is the culture's perspective on darkness? And if any of you have ever been diagnosed with any sort of mental disturbance in your life, you know exactly what the culture thinks. Then we're going to talk about the blocks of resistance that are sitting in our mind that prevent us from dissolving anything difficult in our lives. And we're kind of going to go deeper than the surface here and really look at the psyche and why this is happening. Next, we'll talk about the heart of the show, which is transcending time to live in the now. And I want to teach you how you can possibly pull out of that cyclical thinker that's just going, pulling us into a victim mentality a lot, how you can pull out of this and shift the way that you see in the now moment. And then lastly, I'm going to leave you with 3 simple tools, very simple things that you can do in your life that can begin to help you shift perspective in the now moment and watch your state of mind transform. So let's get started with just looking at depression or darkness in general terms. When you think about being diagnosed with a mental disturbance today, these are typically not looked at in a good light, are they? It's like you're labeled as something and it's seen as a problem, right? I mean, not only does your mind see it as a problem because it's a disturbance in your life, but society and the culture labels it as so. So it's really difficult to get out of this frame of mind that the darkness or depression or anxiety or panic or nervousness or any of these emotions that we can experience that seem negative, that they could be helpful to us. Our mind immediately goes to, you have a problem, society sees it as a problem. And if you've ever been in this situation for longer than a short period of time, let's say you've been diagnosed with a chronic situation where it's going on for years and years and years, you know that everyone around you is going, it's time to get out of this. It's time for you to move on. You've been doing this long enough. And you're thinking, that's great if only I knew how, right? If only I knew how to get out of it. Because that's usually the problem. We get really far down Alice's dark, deep hole, yet we have no clue how to emerge, how to shift, how to look at this differently, and how to start a new way of life. It seems almost impossible. For those of you that are new to the show, you may not know this. Anybody who's been listening for a long time, you know that the whole foundation of this show is based on my personal experience and sort of this radical shift in consciousness that I experienced a very long time ago. Not only did I have a shift in my awareness, but it brought me into the deepest, darkest place I've ever been in my life. I experienced a literal hell for years and years and years. And when you get into that space, it's very difficult to see beyond it. It's like you dig yourself deep enough and you're going down further and further and further that you don't see the light. You don't know how you're going to get out of it. And not only do you not know how, you don't believe you're going to get out of it anymore. It becomes such a permanent state of your mind that you just think this is your life forever. And I was there. And for those of you that are listening that have ever had this experience, you know what I'm talking about. It seems like a daunting task. And society doesn't help, right? There's a whole push in our world to avoid the darkness, even in the spiritual communities. Don't go to the dark, only go to the light, right? I mean, how many times have you heard this? There's an overall conditioning in the mind that says darkness is bad. There's nothing available there for you. It couldn't possibly be offering you anything helpful. Avoid it at all costs. And the psychiatric community does a great job with that because they have a slew of pharmaceutical drugs that you can take to sort of alleviate your symptoms. And that may be beneficial to some people for some time, but does it really address the real issue at the root of the problem? Probably not. It just makes it so that you can function and at least maneuver through your day without feeling just absolutely awful. I want you to think of darkness also sort of in the ancient times when we were looking more at mystics and saints and contemplatives. They were often speaking about the dark night of the soul, that it's very much a part of this dissolving of a false identity that we believe ourselves to be, and this yearning to commune with the divine or commune with God or become one with our larger self. And as they're going through this process, they reach the depths of hell or a state of incredible despair, where when your small identity or who you've identified with your entire life starts to suddenly dissolve, yet that large awareness, that presence with a capital P, or that higher self or that symbol of home hasn't yet come in yet, there's a feeling of falling into a deep, deep void, almost like a feeling of nothingness, as if the divine has left you and has permanently left you, and now you're in a state of what they refer to as the dark night of the soul. And maybe some of you have experienced this, where you feel like there's nothing there. Everything has left you, that God or the divine has permanently left you. And it's a very surreal, uncomfortable, horrible, I should say, feeling. It can really take over and feel incredibly heavy. Having said that, though, the dark night of the soul is seen as a very necessary part of this awakening process of you discovering your larger self. It's absolutely normal. So in the sense of the old mystics and saints and contemplatives, this was not an abnormal process. Now, difficult, yes. Horrible to experience, maybe, but necessary. So it wasn't looked at as some strange thing. And somewhere along the way, and I have no idea what has happened, all of that information has just been taken out of our current culture. It's like it's vanished, or somebody did something with it. I don't know. But there is another way to see darkness or depression or difficult moments in your life, that maybe they aren't there to harm you. Maybe they aren't there to keep you in this horrible state of mind forever. Maybe it's offering you something, but you just haven't seen it yet. Or you're not in an environment or surrounded by anybody who's offering you this as an answer. Because when you're really stuck, you don't have any answers, right? You don't see anything. If you get around somebody who may see something a little differently, maybe they can shine a light on it. It might actually help you. So I want to pose a few questions for you to think about that might help you if you're struggling with any difficult moment in your life. And the first question is it possible that there's a deeper meaning and purpose to your darkness? Do you think it's possible? It's not whether or not you see what it means yet or what it's offering you, but is it possible that this experience might have a deeper purpose? And that's all the question is asking is it possible? Can your mind open enough to say, yeah, it's possible that this might be leading me somewhere, even though I feel horrible? The second question I want you to think about is, can this dark experience be an invitation to a new way of life right now, like right in this moment? And that might be a strange question. When you think about getting an invitation somewhere, you think of that invitation as being something fun and exciting, right? If somebody's handing you an invitation to a party or an upcoming event and you're RSVP, you want to go because it's going to be so much fun. It's hard to imagine that when you're in the depths of hell, right, and you're experiencing something horrible, that it could be an invite to something good. It's really hard to wrap your mind around, isn't it? But what I'm asking you is, can this darkness be an invitation into a new way of life? And is that new way of life an option right here in this now moment? And the last question I want you to think about is it possible to reframe your depression or your darkness as a necessary part of your own unique personal journey? Is it possible that it's necessary? And you could answer this question pretty simply. And this is something I always think about in my own life. You know how you know things are necessary in your life? It's because they're happening. It simply is happening. Therefore, it must need to happen. If you're somebody who said everything happens for a reason, well, it's really easy to grab a hold of that concept when everything's going fabulously, right? When everything's going fabulously, you love that this is happening for a reason, right? But when you enter the darkness or a horrific state of mind that you've been experiencing for much longer than you want to, you don't see that as everything's happening for a reason, do you? You're seeing it as, this is horrible. I should not be experiencing this. This is ruining my life. I'm never going to get out of it. Do any of you share those same thoughts when things aren't going well? And you see it in a very negative light. It's very difficult to see that when you're in a place of difficulty, that this moment is happening for a reason, right? That it's a necessary part of your journey. The only time it gets easier to accept these things is if you've been doing it a while. If you've recognized already that, everything I go through, no matter what it is, positive or negative, is happening because it's necessary for me. The other thing you might want to consider if you're struggling with difficult moments in your life, and maybe they come and go, but they happen. I mean, we all go through these. We're not getting out of here without having some dark times, are we? I mean, that's what this world is. We're living in the dual world. The world of duality, the world of opposites is going to provide us with a lot of different experiences. And our mind loves to label these emotions we experience as positive and negative. I know in the past I've mentioned this, but I'm going to mention it again. It's very helpful to remove those terms, positive and negative, from your mind and simply just look at them as an array of emotion that you experience, whether it's fear, terror, darkness, depression, anxiety, worry, all these things that the culture says are negative. And then over here on the other side where you feel happiness and joy and contentment and excitement and love and peace, those are considered positive. If you can erase those labels, positive and negative, it will really help you realize that all those emotions are simply guiding you to where you need to be. You can listen to each emotion that comes up and actually see, where do I need to go with this? What is this teaching me? What is this darkness telling me right now? And you're using it more as a guide than looking at it as, only these emotions are good and these are bad, and that's why I feel so horrible. So learning to eliminate the labels is really helpful, really helped me a lot. And it's difficult if you're in the mainstream mental health community because everything is labeled. Like they'll label you with everything under the sun, right? And if you've had that in your life where you've been labeled with a million things, what you can start doing is just saying, what are these emotions saying to me? Without looking at it as a label that it's negative or bad, but it's there to offer you something. You could start shifting your perspective even in that moment. So let's shift gears now and look at the blocks of resistance that are sitting deep within us that prevent us from dissolving these challenging times. First off, I want to discuss and define the ego mind. So deep within us, in our psyche, we have what's called the ego mind. And the ego mind is solely concerned with self-preservation. The ego is based on separation. It's separate from God. It's created an identity, and it's out for number one. The ego mind is looking out for self-gratification. It's also loaded with expectation. It's loaded with needing to know the outcome of everything. The ego is the great knower. It literally needs to know everything. Can you see this in your own mind? Sometimes, like, you're going through a difficult moment, and it's like your mind wants to know every little detail about why this is happening, how you're going to get out of it, who can help you, this shouldn't be happening. You know, the mind is just constantly going and wanting to know everything. So this is the ego mind. It's the special identity that you identify in the world as I identify as Lindsay. Whatever your given name is, you identify as that. And we're all living in these separate bodies. We see each other as separate, even though there's a place deep within us that suggests otherwise, that maybe we aren't separate, that maybe we're all connected to something greater. The role of the ego mind, and I really want you to listen to this, the role of the ego, its primary objective is to prevent you from ever meeting your true self or your higher self or that spiritual mind that's sitting within you. Because if you do meet this place, it's the beginning of the end for the ego mind. Because you will start seeing something in a completely new perspective. Your life will become altered in a good way. And you'll recognize that this critical, constant thinking mind that keeps you looping around, grabbing a hold of thought all day long is not where you want to be anymore. And there is a choice there. Keep in mind, the ego's objective is to keep that spiritual mind covered up so that you don't see it and have access to it. Now that we've talked about the ego mind, let's look at the spiritual mind. You can think of it like inside of yourself and inside all of us. We all have a split mind. We have the ego and we have our spiritual mind. And these two do not get along. They're not even in the same ballpark. They represent completely different things. And the spiritual mind is representing our highest self, our connection to God, our remembrance or symbol of home. And it has nothing to do with a special identity. This place within our mind is reminding us that we are larger than the small identity, that we are much more than the personal self. There's much more to the story. And so the spiritual aspect of the mind is sitting there waiting for us to see this. And if we see it, our entire life will begin to shift and change. But because most of us are so rooted in our personal identity and we're grabbing a hold of the ego, we're living in that realm and we're not seeing the opportunity that's sitting there waiting for us. So when I say blocks of resistance, this is what's going on underneath the surface, that the ego is literally spending all of its time distracting you from seeing the opportunity that's available to get out of all of this mess that we're in. It spends all of its time, masterfully, I should say, distracting us 24/7, keeping us focused on the external events in the world, keeping us focused on what? Survival. Because that's the name of the game in this world. We all have to eat, right? We got to eat. We got to feed other people in the house. We got to pay for the shelter that we're living in. And it's just nonstop all the time. But that is the name of the game for the ego. It's a projection of mind. And everything it does is projected outside of yourself so that your focus is external and you never go inward to meet that spiritual mind, which is where all of the answers reside. You hear a lot of people talk about the blocks that we have, and you could spend a lot of time looking at actual experiences that are blocking you, maybe past memories or traumas that might be hindering you from moving forward in your life. And that's an important thing to look at. But if you want to take it a little bit deeper and get to the real root of the problem, the real root has to do with this subconscious battle that's sort of going on with the ego. And most of us, because we're so focused on things on the surface, and we're focused on the external world in front of us, and we're rooted in the ego identity, that we have no idea this is even happening. But when you become aware of it, when you know that it's happening, when you begin to see your psyche and how it operates, everything will begin to shift in your life. Now let's get to what the heart of my discussion was this weekend, which was transcending time to live in the now. And in order to do that, we first have to define time. From the ego's perspective, which is where we're mostly coming from, time is linear in this world, right? We all collectively believe that there's a past, present, and a future. And our ego minds create a story about ourselves. What's your personal story? I mean, when you meet somebody else, tell me about yourself. You're basically saying, tell me about your story. Tell me about your life. Who are you in this world? And we identify that with the timeline that we think is linear. And the body is certainly showing us that it's linear, right? It gets older, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. I'm looking in the mirror lately going, oh, there's some more lines around my eyes. I'm starting to get a few more aches and pains in the body, starting to age and feel older. The body is showing us that we're living in linear time. And then from a broader perspective, metaphysically, if you think about reincarnation, whether you believe in it or not, just for the sake of discussion, let's say we're reincarnating all the time. We're literally going through time cyclically over and over and over and over. And then you have to ask yourself, why? At least this always hits my head. Why are we doing that? There must be more to this whole thing than just cyclically going through patterns over and over and over again. And this is the domain of the ego. The ego is keeping us rooted in time. It's keeping us distracted in this timeline, right? So that we don't see the spiritual self. Because in the spiritual self's perspective, there is no such thing as time. If you think about the Godhead, or everything is one in God, we can't even fathom what that even means, right? It's just so far beyond our small mind's comprehension. But if you look at the basic concept, if it's really one essence, that means it's completely beyond separate identities and separate bodies and a separate world we're living in. It's something so beyond what we can fathom. But it's outside of this timeline. And the ego is terrified to show us what's available outside of this timeline. It's so terrified that we're going to access our spiritual self in the now, that it won't have a purpose anymore. The ego is truly terrified of its own demise. If you want to get down to what's really going on here, the ego doesn't want to experience its own death because it has everything riding on its specialness, your special identity, continuing to project out into the world and keep you distracted. And it keeps you distracted so you never access the now moment. The now moment is where all of the answers reside. Because in the now is when you can step out of that cyclical thinker in your mind, you can pull out of it and access a timelessness, a feeling as if there is no time. And you're thinking, how in the hell do you do that? Right? I mean, it's fun to talk about philosophically, metaphysically. As long as I can remember, I've fathomed these types of things. I can remember being a very young child, lying in my bed at night, trying to fathom the concept of nothing. It would just hit me. What if there was nothing? And I would try to trace it to outer space, like blackness. There wouldn't even be space. And in a strange way, that's what I was saying is There's no time and space. But I couldn't get there in my mind. It was just so far beyond my comprehension. But I was thinking about it. How many of you have thought about these things in your life? Like, what is going on here? What is all of this? And what is this now moment? And how can it be experienced so differently than we experience our everyday life? Because when you think about it, we experience our everyday life and we think we're really present in the now. And maybe we are, but we're siding with the ego. So everything's go, 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 think, get there, do this, check this list off. You know what I'm talking about. It's more of a rat race. But when you pull out of the rat race and you pull out of the thinker, everything changes. And how do you do that? Just like I asked, how in the world do you do this? I want you to think of shifting out of your thinking mind and taking a step back. And you're going to become the watcher of your life, or you're going to become the observer of everything around you. When I was going through my radical shift, there was a moment in time that I was literally just pulled out of my thinker, and I was sitting in this vast field that eventually I learned to call the observer. And it was like I was watching everything around me. And not only that, I was watching myself. You talk about a surreal experience to suddenly be catapulted out of who you identify as, and then suddenly you're seeing your personality on autopilot and you no longer identify with it. You're watching it, wondering, how is the personality self still talking? That used to be something that would go through my head. What is talking right now? Because I wasn't identifying with it anymore. I was out here watching it all. And I could watch myself like an actor on the stage of life. And I was watching everybody else around me. And it became eventually a very normal part of my life. At first, it was very shocking and strange. So what I want you to think about, for those of you that are interested in looking at your life a little bit differently, is pulling out of the thinker, standing back, and watching. The number one thing to remember in doing this is that you want to have no judgment when this is happening. When you are truly connected to the field, there is no judgment. It's literally just present. It just sits there and watches. You don't even have a comment about what's happening. You're just so present with it. You're just looking at what's happening. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't interact. It doesn't mean that your personality self won't get involved with what's happening in the present moment. But what it is saying is you're accessing another dimension of time. And I like to think of it as multitasking. You're now multitasking. For those of you that do multitasking jobs in the world, think about this on another level. You're multitasking spiritually. You're stepping outside of that constant commentary in your mind and you're watching everything around you. You know the commentary I'm talking about, right? When you go somewhere and you're attached to your belief system and you're attached to your thinking mind, and you go somewhere, let's say you go to a crowded environment. There's a lot of people, there's a line, and you're going, what is this guy doing? He's holding up the line. Oh, come on. Or you're driving in traffic and you get cut off. What do? You start commenting on the person that's cutting you off. Or you start accelerating, trying to show him. I mean, it's kind of funny when you're able to pull out of this, you start seeing all of these things happening. You start being able to watch your own mind. And although strange at first, it's an absolute gift to be able to see and witness what you are doing. In a way, it's like you're depersonalizing. You're not getting invested in everything anymore. You're just simply watching it. So when we're talking about transcending time to live in the now and sort of trying to dissolve this dark feeling that you may be experiencing or a difficult moment in your life, you're stepping out of that thinker, the judgmental thinker that wants to tell you that this is a permanent situation that you're never going to get out of. And then you grab a hold of that, right? The mind takes the bait and believes it. And now you're in a state of hell. You don't feel good, do you, when this happens? But if you step out of it and you just watch those thoughts without attaching to them, without taking the bait, and you just watch them, you can begin to analyze and see what you've been doing. Oh, I actually don't have to believe that thought, and I've been believing it. And that's why I find myself in this situation. Thoughts are going to be thoughts. They're just going to be there no matter what. It's a matter of if you grab a hold of them and attach to them. That's the difference. Just as a reminder, if you start learning to pull out of your mind and just watching everything, don't try to not think because that's a recipe for thinking. So don't worry about trying to not let your mind think. Your mind is going to think. It's always going to think. So don't worry about that. You're just pulling out and watching. That's all. And the more you do this and the more you access this larger presence in the now and this expansive field that's available to you, and the more you sit with it, the more it's going to expand and grow. The awareness within you is going to grow, and it'll become easier and easier to access. It's one thing to practice this at home, and I recommend doing this at first. Being in your own space, sitting in your room, looking around at objects. No judgment, just looking. You could be outside. Just take a few moments whenever you have time, whether it's daily or a couple times a week. It doesn't matter. There's no rules for this. It's just whenever it works for you. But just take time to sit and connect to that larger field and that essence that's there that's just simply watching without judgment. The more that you do this, then the task becomes accessing the now moment, that vastness that's there, the awareness field that's present, accessing that in your daily life as you do whatever you do every day. That's when the challenge starts. Because it's one thing to just sit and be, and it's easier to do that than it is to be conversing with other people at work and still accessing the now, staying connected to that larger field, staying out of that judgment, staying out of the cyclical thinker that's going and going and looping and looping. It becomes much more difficult in your practical life, but it's 100% possible. It just takes practice. So now that we've talked about that, how you can sort of dissolve these experiences to get really present and experience something totally different than the mind that wants to make you feel terrible, right? The ego that's trying to pull you into the hole. It's pulling you down Alice's hole. And I don't know about any of you, but I went down the hole hard, like way down there with Alice. I want to shift gears now and give you some tools. What can you do to get out of this mindset and start shifting your perspective so that you start feeling better in your life, that you start accessing this peace and love and contentment and calm that is sitting within you? The first thing I want you to consider is to get curious about what you're going through. Instead of looking at it as a problem and as a negative and as a bad thing, and I need to get out of it immediately, I need to cover it up so I can continue my life, is to adopt a curious state of mentality to see, what is this experience offering me? So instead of looking at it as a problem, that it's negatively impacting me, we're shifting our frame of mind and we're saying, what could this be teaching me? Is it possible that it's there to provide me some guidance? Is it leading me somewhere, right? I'm curious now, what other things could be happening that could benefit me? Instead of thinking of it as horrific, how could it be benefiting me? Maybe it's taking me somewhere new. Do you see the difference? When you get curious about something, it's like you become an investigative reporter, right? You have put on that investigative hat and you now want to know every little detail about what other possibilities exists for the challenging time that you're in. What else could it be saying to you? The other thing I want you to think about that goes hand in hand with curiosity is willingness. It's one thing to say I can or can't do something, but it's quite another to say, am I willing? Am I willing to look at this situation differently? I'm so tired of feeling this way. I'm tired of feeling stuck. I'm tired of feeling like I'm not going anywhere or getting anywhere in this situation. I'm tired of feeling like I'm only getting worse. And now I'm willing to look at this differently, to see what's available to me. What could it be saying? Is it possible that it's a gift? Is it telling me that I'm ready for something new in my life? Even if I don't feel that way, is it telling me that? That maybe I need to look at my life differently. Maybe I need to look at all of life differently. When you begin to shift out of this resistance that you might be experiencing, is it possible that this experience is offering you a ticket to a completely new way of life? It's hard to imagine you're being offered a ticket to somewhere new when you feel like crap, right? It's like, I thought the ticket was taking me somewhere horrible. But what if that's not the case? What if this experience is an opportunity to guide you somewhere new? And can you drop the need to know where that experience might be leading you? Can you drop the ego's need to know everything? Can you just lay it down? I don't know anything. I know nothing about what's happening. I don't know why it's happening or where I'm headed, when I'm going to get out of it. And it's okay. I'm totally okay with it because I'm curious and willing to see this in a new light. I now trust that this larger essence that I can access is guiding me somewhere new. Can you begin to see that possibility? Can you potentially embrace your darkness? Can you reframe your thinking mind to see something in a new light? The next tool I'm going to give you is the best. I love this one. I do it myself, and I think it's hugely beneficial for anyone. Become the student in the classroom of life. The ego is the great knower of everything, right? Sometimes it's easy for us to think that, oh, we have a lot to share with other people and we're amazing teachers for other people. And all of this may be true. But underneath it, can you adopt the mentality that you're still a student in the classroom of life, no matter what roles you play in the world? That you recognize that you don't have all the answers, and that you're willing to be guided in the now moment when you access this spiritual essence, that you could be guided by something that knows more than you. This intelligence field that seems to know much more than we do, could you be guided by that and become the student for the remainder of your life? Not just now, for the rest of your life, could you become a student? So no matter what happens in your life, the experience that you're having, whether it appears good or bad, is there to provide you something, some insight, something that you need to learn about yourself. Maybe it's something you need to learn about the world or someone else. Maybe it's an opportunity for forgiveness. All of these things are options. I want you to think of becoming the student in the classroom of life as like a switching of the guard within you. That you're allowing spirit to lead you and you're letting the ego take a back seat. So again, switching of the guard. Ego is going to the back. My spiritual essence is moving forward, and I'm allowing that to guide me. And when you allow this larger essence to guide you, you no longer see it as a problem. It's now a solution leading the way. And it's leading the way to something new, and you don't know where that is, but you're completely open to whatever it is. There are people who may tell you to try to get rid of your ego, that the whole point of spiritual awakening is to dissolve the ego. There might be some truth to that, but I would not focus on that in your life, because as long as we're human beings, there will always be an aspect of ego within us. But when I'm speaking of switching of the guard, I'm simply referring to the ego taking a back seat. And what's really happening is you're so connected to your spiritual self, you're so willing to be guided by this expansive field that you no longer give any attention or attachment to your ego's thoughts. You still see it. You still know that it's there. You'll still witness the crazy thinking that it presents you, but you recognize that you don't have to become attached to it any longer. So that's the difference. When you're the student in the classroom of life, you can become open to learning what the higher self is here to teach you. Like I said, you understand that you don't know all the answers, and it's completely fine, but you're willing to listen. It's that little bit of curiosity and willingness now to listen and be guided. The last thing I want you to think about when you become the student is rediscovering the childlike nature that is within you. The wonder that you may have had as a child, that you tap into that again as you go through your life. Remember when you were a child and you're walking around and everything is new and you're in such a state of awe and wonder about everything. And then as you get a little bit older, what happens, right? The conditioning sets in. You have more responsibilities. Then you have to go out and get a job. You have to feed yourself. You have to figure out how you're going to live on your own. And then you completely forget about that childlike innocence and wonder that was always there. It's when the ego's conditioning takes over, it suppresses it, and you forget about it completely. But it is still there. So think about that when you become the student, that you're now going back to this, I am curious like I was when I was a child. I'm so interested and I wonder about everything. I'm wondering why this experience is happening. Where is it guiding me? And this goes for the experience that you might be struggling with now, an experience that you may have been struggling on and off with, or an experience that you may encounter in the future. The last tool I'm going to give you is simply to implement these principles into your daily life. It's one thing to talk about curiosity and willingness and becoming the student. It's quite another to do them, right? To actually do them in your practical life. That's always one of my focuses on this show, is we can talk about all these amazing topics, yet actually doing them is a completely different ballgame. It's a whole nother way to live when you actually implement them. So as you implement these into your life, try to commit to just taking time to go within and connecting to that larger field. Like I said earlier, just taking time to sit and be. Whether you have 3 to 5 minutes a day, or you have half an hour or an hour, or you only have a little bit of time every week, it's really catered to whatever you can do. But stay committed. Stay committed to getting into that present moment. And then as you get comfortable with that, you start implementing that connection to the present moment as you're living your life. And when you access this present moment, you start recognizing that a lot of things aren't relevant, that a lot of things you were thinking and believing just don't matter. It's like, why was I holding on to that so intensely? It doesn't even mean anything. Like the more you get into a vastness, you'll start seeing this. And the more and more you get into it, you start entering kind of a state of comedy, where everything starts becoming rather funny because you're no longer attached to this special, small identity as the ego. In fact, you kind of see it for what it is. And it's perfectly okay because it is what it is. A couple of reminders when you're implementing this into your practical life is be gentle with yourself, because it's not going to happen overnight. You're not just going to pop out of your darkness immediately, or whatever challenging moment you might be facing. It takes time, but you can use the now moment to make the shift happen. Instead of falling into these same problematic patterns over and over and over, get curious, be willing to see something differently. What is this moment offering you? Remind yourself of that when you fall into the same pattern and the same trap, which is totally normal. If you've been doing something over and over again for years and years and years, pulling you into that state of resistance where nothing's moving and you feel really stuck, it's not going to happen immediately, is it? So be gentle with yourself. Don't beat yourself up if you see that you're going to go back and forth. It's completely normal. And then the last thing to think about is just allow any feelings or emotions that you're experiencing to just come up. Be honest with yourself. Let your feelings that may seem very uncomfortable rise to the surface when they need to. Just let it all come up. Let it come up so that you can release it and move on. And as these experiences happen and these moments come up and these feelings arise and you let them go, these things were hindrances. They were keeping you from seeing what's underneath. So allow everything to come up when it needs to. So I hope these 3 simple tools, having curiosity and willingness, becoming the student in the classroom of this life, and then implementing these strategies into your daily life, can help you, that they can help you see that the darkness does not have to be a problem, that whatever challenge you may be experiencing, it doesn't have to be seen as a bad thing or a negative thing, that it could actually be leading you somewhere new, into a completely new way of life that might even be better than what you're experiencing now. One last thing before I wrap up the show today that I want you to remember is as you implement a new way of thinking into your life, where you start shifting your perspective and reframing everything, remember that your ego mind is going to want to resist this entire process. It's going to battle you. It's going to want to lure you back into those cycles of time. It doesn't want you to see that in this now moment, that everything can change because you have access to your spiritual self. Remember, it doesn't want you to see that. So when it occurs, when you feel the resistance come up within you, see it for what it is. Oh, there it is. My ego is just in a battle. It doesn't want me to see the truth. It doesn't want me to access my true self. It doesn't want me to get rid of this darkness so that I could see the light in me and the light that's in everything around me and throughout this entire world. So I hope this topic in this chat that I was able to share this weekend can help you deal with those moments in life that seem like they're never going to get any better, that they're never going to end, that life's going to go down another dark hole. Speaking from my own personal experience, I was right there with you. But you know what? There's something deep within you that knows better. There's something deep, way down within you. The light that shines so bright that's trying to communicate with you, that is trying to tell you it's not true. There's so much more available to you. And when you let that light within you shine a little bit brighter, when you have access to it and when you give it attention, when you recognize that you actually do have a decision to make, that I don't have to see it this way, that I can access that door within me with a little bit of light shining in it, and I can start opening that door wider and wider and wider until it shines so bright that I see life in a completely new way. It's absolutely possible. The darkness can absolutely lead the way to the light. That'll wrap up today's show. Until next time, I invite you to check out my website at livelikeeden.com. You can sign up for a weekly email reminder when my new podcast and blog comes out, which is every Wednesday. If you are struggling with your own awakening process and you need further assistance or guidance, you can also sign up for a free consult, and I would be more than happy to work with you. If you're enjoying the show, I ask that you share it with others that you think it might benefit. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.